Now we turn to our special report tonight on gun safety reform. I say gun safety, not gun control, because while banning certain guns remains controversial, preventing certain people from buying guns, not controversial at all. Think about it like this. We are a nation divided over all kinds of stuff, from Trump to abortion. But there's unity here. 9 out of 10 Americans support background checks to restrict dangerous people from buying a gun, includes Republicans and gun owners, because you're using the law to make sure only law-abiding people get guns, and most people find that pretty logical. Now, Donald Trump may know that, because after several mass shootings, he's claimed to agree with that majority of Americans, only to backtrack.
There's a great appetite, and I mean a very strong appetite, for background checks, and I think we can bring up background checks like we've never had before. We have to have meaningful background checks. We don't want to see crazy people owning guns, but I also want to remember that mental illness is something nobody wants to talk about. We have very, very strong background checks right now. A lot of the people that put me where I am are strong believers in the Second Amendment, and I am also. And we have to be very careful about that. You know, they call it the slippery slope, and all of a sudden everything gets taken away.
So that's Trump. That's his flip-flop. But Rick Ross says some things are deeper than rap. Some things are deeper than Trump. Because while he did that in days, Republicans in the NRA have made the same flip-flop shift. They just took years. After the Columbine shooting in 1999, gun violence was a flashpoint. 9 out of 10 Americans still wanted to close that gun show loophole, identical to now. But if you look at the history at the time, 31 Senate Republicans voted in support of background checks, with the NRA's support, including the man who's now Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell. But that doesn't mean they made background checks a reality. Republicans cast those votes in a process where then other Republicans blocked the bill from becoming law because the House voted it down. 13 years after Columbine, another massacre at Sandy Hook. And look at the polling pattern. If you checked at the time, again, the vast majority of Americans and gun owners still supported background checks. But with a Democratic president and Barack Obama and a wider push for reform, there was more of the prospect that bill could actually become law. And dun, 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 the Republicans shifted. This time, only 4 Republicans in the Senate voted for those background checks. McConnell switched his vote to no, matching that wider shift I'm mentioning from the NRA. Now, some people forget all of this history. It's actually important to understand today's standoff. The head of the NRA, Wayne LaPierre, faced Congress after Columbine, and he supported background checks. This was back when he was the NRA vice president.
Let's talk about what's reasonable and what's not. We think it's reasonable to provide mandatory instant criminal background checks for every sale at every gun show. No loopholes anywhere for anyone.
Let's talk about what's reasonable. And he's under oath facing the Congress. But by the time President Obama was pushing what you might call that reasonable plan after Sandy Hook, LaPierre had a new line.
So let me ask you this. Do you still, as you did in 1999, still support mandatory background checks at gun shows?
I do not believe the way the law is working now, unfortunately, that it does any good to extend the law to private sales between hobbyists and collectors.
Okay, so you do not support mandatory background checks in all instances at gun shows?
We do not.
We do not. This is really big. Take this in. It's become pretty common to note the NRA doesn't represent all Americans or gun owners or even most gun owners when it comes to background checks. But what you're seeing here in this history that we're documenting tonight is it's deeper. The NRA doesn't even represent itself because, like that Republican Senate caucus, it's been on both sides of this background check issue. Why? Well, there are plenty of critics and experts on this, the people who work on it day in and day out, who tell us, hey, it's easier to support something in Washington than when it has no chance of passing. So a politician can say, oh, yeah, I'm with 9 out of 10 voters, and then they go assure the NRA it doesn't matter. So maybe the NRA and those senators claimed to support background checks back in the day because they had reason to believe those would never become a reality. It's actually kind of an echo of how so many Republicans used to claim they were for free market health care solutions, and then Obama came along and pushed that idea for Obamacare, and suddenly they opposed it. But there's something else going on here. That is exactly why some gun safety advocates say there's a sliver of good news for their cause. They say this debate is exposing some of their opponents because of the policy progress, because they're getting closer, just like so many states are getting closer and have even passed gun safety reforms just in the last year, in 2018. And that raises a larger question. Can these opponents of reform continue to resist that 9 out of 10 political gravity on this issue that is being exposed in public? Can they face down 90% of the voting public and their own records and their own sound of Wayne LaPierre? The answer may come in November of 2020. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.